Hey Paul, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing, JJ?
Good to see you. Hey, I wanted to tell you, I really appreciate how connected you keep us with the enforcement community, and all the work you're doing with state AGs. Really appreciate that. It's nice to know what they're thinking.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's not just nice. I feel like it's increasingly critical to know what the AGs are thinking. And so, it's a great value. I mean, I've enjoyed the opportunity getting to talk to different AGs and AG offices, and really helping to keep everybody informed of where their priorities are. I know you and I have talked about this before. So many demands on their time and attention on a whole variety of topics, and priorities change in an instant within different AG offices. And so staying on top of that is just critical to ensure that you're behaving in a compliant way.
I'm really getting the sense of like how much they care about this. So the last state AG webinar that you held was with Letitia James, right? New York AG. And part of me was thinking, how did he get her to show up? Firstly, like, does she care about this that much? So tell us a bit about that, and what did she run through?
I also questioned how did we get her to show up, because I thought that was fantastic that she took the time to participate in that webinar. And I actually think it really underscores the priority that you're seeing AGs really give to helping to educate and engage with the business community on what their priorities are, what their focus is, and how they want to drive compliance. When it comes to privacy issues generally, this is front and center for the AGs these days, and it's going to continue to be that way now for the foreseeable future. And AG James's comments, in particular, how she was focused on legislation that is currently pending that would greatly expand New York's Consumer Protection Authority. You can foresee all sorts of use cases that they would have if they gain that expanded authority to really elevate New York to the forefront of privacy enforcement, as if they're not already there. But really it gives them such a huge tool in their toolbox now, even in the absence of a comprehensive privacy law. They may be able to do all the same things as everybody else with very broad consumer protection authority.
I was fascinated by that, Paul. Like, firstly, how many times you mentioned consumer protection? Like the word count on that was through the roof. But more specifically, I saw a stat the other day that said something like, "Hey, half of the US in 2 years will be covered by privacy law." But then I remember a conversation we had a few months ago where you said, "JJ, actually, it's 100% right now because every state has UDAP laws and deceptive conduct laws, and New York was all about that."
That's absolutely right. And I think that this expanded consumer protection authority really would underscore that exact point, right? Is that they would have that same kind of authority. Now, are you going to be able to bring some of the more discrete claims that perhaps you can with a comprehensive privacy law? No. But look at the indicators that we see from the active states right now who do have comprehensive privacy laws, and the types of actions that they're bringing. I could absolutely reframe some of those types of issues or investigations into a basic unfairness kind of case, right? And so if New York is gaining that authority, and they, as we've talked about before, are in constant communication with their sister states and talking about enforcement priorities when it comes to privacy, I fully expect that you're going to see the same kind of actions that you see from a California and a Connecticut start to come out of states like New York, even in the absence of a comprehensive privacy law.
So, for example, the retail sweep they did, where they said, "Hey, if you're offering controls or the illusion of controls to consumers, opt in, opt out, whatever the case may be, you don't even have to legally do that in New York. But if you are going to offer that, it better work."
That's right, because otherwise it's deceptive, right?
Mhm.
Whenever you offer something to the public and you say it does X, it better do X. And that's all that this is. I mean, these are basic UDAP theories that states have been pursuing for decades. I mean, there's really nothing new about the way they're framing it. It's just it's a new technology for them.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks, Paul. So, like, moving on to a state that's kind of deep into it now, at Connecticut with Connecticut. So they recently kind of, released their letter on here's where we're focused, here's where we're enforcing. What I found fascinating is, the industry's in focus, right? Retail, okay, that's pretty broad, but then super specific home improvement. Why is there like three of those companies that like we kind of know who you're talking about, right? Like, tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, reporting requirements like this in this sector and in all sectors, right, really do drive, I think, a lot of both, AG priority and what types of enforcement actions they're going to bring. Because, whenever a legislature provides you with a tool like a comprehensive state privacy law, there's an expectation that the enforcer is going to use it and going to bring enforcement actions. And one of the reasons for reports like this is because it allows the legislature to have a look and really a deep dive into what types of priorities the AG is focused on, how they're going to pursue these cases, how they're using the tools, and then importantly, what kind of changes need to be made to those laws. But in addition, reports like this become extremely valuable to educate the AG's constituency. So the public now knows that the AG is really focusing in on particular sectors, as you mentioned. And in many of these cases, as you read the report, you can identify who the specific company is based on the description, right? So you've got a really good sense of who the AG is focused on. But then you also have a great sense of the types of issues that the AG is hearing from the public about, because there's details about the complaints received, and how the AG is responding to those constituency concerns. And so it's really valuable for the public to understand that, but then importantly, for the business community, right? Everybody now understands what the AG's attention is going to be placed to, right? So now we know what the AG is focusing on. We know what that office has concerns about. And everybody's now on notice that you need to come into compliance. Really heavy emphasis in that report on privacy policies and privacy policy compliance, making sure that your privacy policies adhere to Connecticut's law. It should be top of your list right now, because the AG has put out this report and signaled to you that that is something they are looking at and going to take appropriate action if you don't come into compliance. And so, I think it is just a great level of transparency that they provide. I think it's really useful for all of us to see. But just bear in mind that this kind of reporting obligation is going to drive future enforcement. So as it rolls around again, just be ready for another wave from these offices.
Michelle Lucan, the data privacy chief over there, she's been so good at this. Like as I think about all the conversations you've had with her over the past 2 years that have been public, she started 2 years ago. Kind of broad and high level. We're going to do the right thing by Connecticut consumers, and then the law is live. She's talking to the IAB last year, and she says, "Hey, look, I've been looking around, and your privacy policies suck." I ask you questions about brand, I ask brands questions about what are you doing with data? Why do you have so much and why have you kept it for so long? And she's met with shrugs and she's like, look, guys, that's not gonna cut it. And then she follows up with, okay, here are the issues in transparency. They're confusing, they're inadequate. Here are the issues with rights. They're burdensome, they're broken. She's just dialing it in, man. Like
Yep.
if you're not, there's no, like not watching, not listening, like it's not an excuse. She's telling you.
That's right. Well, and a couple of observations along those lines too. The sort of initial focus on things like privacy policies, data minimization, those questions, it's kind of funny to me because I think back 20 years to work that I did when I was at the Texas AG's office, and we did a wave of cases where we pulled records out of dumpsters of various businesses, and we identified all sorts of personal information that was being just dumped in publicly accessible dumpsters. And we raised the same questions, right? Like, why are you saying in your privacy policy that you're protecting sensitive information when it's sitting in a public dumpster and behind your building? And why are you collecting all this stuff in the first place? Like, why do you need all this? it's the same questions. And I raise that and flag that just because AGs aren't going to reinvent the wheel, right? A lot of these folks that are doing these jobs, like Michelle, have been doing this a really long time and a long time before they had their unique state law. And so I fully expect the AGs are going to be asking the same kind of questions that they've always asked. It's just in a new way, and it's with a new technology. And obviously, the amount of data we're talking about is astronomically larger, right? And far more detailed. And so it's just going to cause them to now dig in, as you're identifying, right, into a lot more discrete issues, because we're talking about, such a a magnitude of potential harm to their constituents that they really are going to look at this a different way.
And you're not walking behind a building anymore. You're just opening up your laptop, going to a website, and okay, I mean, it's plain as day. It's right there. I can
Yep.
see what you're doing, which is
Yeah,
amazing.
exactly. Right,
Um,
exactly.
so we're seeing these themes, right? About, hey, if you're offering something, make sure it doesn't work. It was interesting to see, like in Connecticut's letter, talking about, hey, this is actually too burdensome as well when they were talking about rights. Like, and I found that interesting because, like, if a disclosure around transparency or what you're doing in rights is lacking, fair enough, or if it's inadequate, fair enough. But actually, the idea that it shouldn't be burdensome and it shouldn't be confusing seems to be like another level of uh, element they're looking at, I guess. I mean, does that say anything?
So
Has
so
it always
so
been that way?
again, yeah, I mean, again, I agree, right? It is definitely a strong signal, right, that just disclosure and providing some tool is not enough, right? It obviously has to be accessible and usable by your consumers who are if I'm looking to opt out, I need to be able to easily opt out, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. And but it's not inconsistent with the AG's approach in a lot of different areas, that if you tell someone that you have these rights, simply making them available somewhere may not be enough, right? It has to be readily available. It has to be available in a way that people really can make use of these tools. And so I think that that's going to continue to be a theme both in Connecticut and elsewhere, is that you're going to definitely see that become more of a focus, is that technical compliance or technically having the tools still doesn't meet the burden and the standard that you need under the law.
Gotcha. Oh, thanks, Paul. So let's talk about California. I mean, Data Privacy Week, and then late Friday. We're still not away from the late Friday news jobs here, but
I
so they're
now I
going
think
after.
they just take pride in that now, right? I think it's like late Fridays, let's blow up everybody's email box. Let's do it. Yeah.
So what are they up to? I mean, the streaming thing obviously was interesting that they're going after streaming providers. What was interesting there for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's some of the same themes we were just talking about, right? Um, you know, easy mechanisms, right? Making things easy to opt out of the sale of data. Obviously, that's a this recurring theme that we're hearing. I find it interesting that they focused on such a very specific area, but obviously something that impacts almost everybody these days, right? So they are staying on top of the types of data that I think are going to hit the largest populations. And again, similar to what we talked about with Connecticut, I think California now is demonstrating, like, Privacy Week is a good time for them to, the AG in particular, to step out and show, um, you know, I'm on top of this, right? I am also enforcing this law, and I'm going to continue to be front and center on these issues. And so, we're here in this world where we still don't have a whole lot of actual enforcement documents, no lawsuits or settlements, like, to really be able to compile and look at and come up with different theories on how AGs are tackling things. But these types of announcements and notice letters that are coming out from these different offices, that's the purpose of them, right? It really is the same goal from California's perspective. The reason you want to broadcast this is not just because you're putting those particular businesses on notice that they've potentially done something wrong, but you're putting the entire business community on notice that they need to be compliant. You're putting the public on notice that you're doing something about this, and you're putting your legislature on notice that we're actually going to enforce this law and we're going to continue to do so.
I love it, Paul. You know, it was a nice reminder that the world's not just about your website.
Right.
It's a
That's right.
multi-channel world. It's a multi-device world. Regulators are looking right there. I think that was super important. And I'm with you. Like, there are these kind of common themes, right? And I remember something you told me a while back, because it feels like sometimes you're dealing with, you know, regulator by regulator, right, at a state level, but actually they talk, they pick up the
Yes.
phone. Hey, what are you doing? So what else are they doing in a coordinated way that's
Yeah.
coming?
Yeah, and I know we've talked about, their the frequency in which they talk, right? And obviously, I think Michelle has publicly talked about sort of the group that she leads talking about legislation. So it's not just the states with laws, but the states that have laws going into effect or even considering legislation. They're all coordinating both on what that looks like, what enforcement priorities should be. But, a big flag for everybody right now should be the National Association of Attorneys General incoming president, Ellen Rosenblum in Oregon, has announced her presidential initiative is protecting teens. And a big part of that protection is privacy of teen data. So, we're talking that sort of segment above 13, right? The sort of post COPPA age, but still in teenage years, where I think the AGs are really going to be taking a hard look at companies' practices on how they handle that data of this sensitive group, what they're doing with it, how it's being sold or processed or transferred to others, and then ultimately the impact that that has on teens. Already, we're seeing AG Rosenblum really kind of dig into some of these themes. She's going to hold a conference towards the end of the summer just on these issues, but it's going to be throughout the year. Every time the AGs get together, these are topics that are going to be on the agenda. They're going to be talking about these issues, and they're really going to be strategizing on what can they do, sort of circling back to our initial point, right, about the breadth of consumer protection laws. I think the AGs are really going to be talking about how do we leverage those consumer protection laws and start protecting teens. We saw some of that start last year with the lawsuits against Meta. I think we're going to see a lot more of that this coming year, given that there's such a very specific focus on teens.
Gotcha. Thanks, Paul. How do we, I mean, you're doing these webinars, you're doing a ton of them this year, right? We'll post a couple of those in this, but what's the best way to stay in touch with you and all this stuff? Attend the Kelly Dry webinars, of course.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we write a lot of blogs, we do a lot of webinars, and this is why, right? Because it is so frequently evolving and changing that we're really trying to, make sure everybody has information real time. This is what we do, right? Our group is out there at all of these different AG events. We're talking to all the AGs, we're talking to their key staff. We're making sure that we're up to speed on where their priorities are and what their focus is so that we can relay that out to everyone. So, our Ad Law Access blog, our state AG webinars, everything that Kelly Dry helps coordinate this way, it's meant to help educate everybody.
You're doing God's work, Paul. Thanks. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thanks a lot for sharing your perspective.
Yeah, thank you.